Intellectual property. When an artist creates something, who owns it? Let's talk about that. Hey there, this is Perch, talking a little bit about IP, and more specifically, who owns IP and who owns characters. And this is one of those kind of topics that has a really quick, simple answer, and then a much more complicated underneath answer. So, the really quick, simple answer is that who owns the characters and who owns the IP is really all inherent in the contract that's signed with the creator at the time, be it the writer or the artist. That's it. Many of the agreements are work for hire arrangements, and in a work for hire arrangement, in most cases, you get neither IP ownership or credit in any way for the characters that are produced. And there's been lawsuits that'll get to the complicated part we're going to talk about in a minute. But generally speaking, if you're going to work for Marvel, you're going to work for DC, your characters and things that you create under your contract are owned by Marvel or DC. They're not owned by you, the writer, or you, the artist. Now, in some cases, in your contract or in your agreement with the company, you might get what's called kind of a producer credit, where if there's a movie or there's some kind of thing that happens, you get credited with the character and with the creation. And in some cases, there are royalties that can exist with your character. So if your character goes on to either make money in the comic or make money in the movies or wherever it makes money, that can be another thing where you can get some additional royalty, or you're still not given ownership, meaning, so I should define ownership a little bit. Ownership can mean different things to different people. The most pure version of ownership means if you, person, creates Spider-Man, then you get to say, you, the owner of Spider-Man, gets to say whether the character is, there's a movie made, t-shirts, licensing, how the character is represented. I mean, a classic example of somebody who owns the rights to the characters and meticulously controls where they go and is kind of rabid about how they're used is J.K. Rowling, who invented and wrote the Harry Potter universe. There are lots and lots of videos out there chronicling the history of her with Universal and Disney, and how Disney kind of went head to head with Rowling, where the Imagineers, to get into this very, very quickly, because I think it illustrates the point well, Disney was planning to have the rights to do Harry Potter and theme park, and this was a kind of a long run of Disney and Harry Potter that ran. The head of Disney's publishing division actually had the opportunity to publish Harry Potter and to basically own all the book rights, and I lowballed them for some ridiculously low number, like I think it was higher, it's like $50,000 basically for the Harry Potter rights when the first book was released over in Britain, and ultimately the rights went other places, and Disney was seen as lowballing. But the issue with Rowling and Disney, as it kind of developed over the years, was less about the money. The money always matters, but more about the creative control. And Rowling was insistent that she had final creative control. She had the say, and when they were working on trying to get the Harry Potter in the Disney theme park, there was just kind of ridiculously poor efforts put forth by the Disney Imagineers, who were very arrogant about the property, viewed it as not theirs, so therefore deserved kind of a less importance, and that basically kind of screwed around, for lack of a better word, with the concept, to the point where Rowling kept rejecting the concepts and got a reputation within Disney and Disney faithful as being difficult to work with, because she was being very controlling about the property. And ultimately, all the way up to Bob Iger, who said, "Oh, we'll definitely make this right and make this work well with Rowling," but then kind of turned around and said, "Screw this woman," and she went off and did her own thing with Universal. The interesting thing about that is that now, kind of Universal and their Harry Potter world, I wouldn't say it resurrected Universal Studios, but it definitely put it in the camp of competing actively with Disney, and combine that with them having the Nintendo rights and all of that, we could see in the next 5 years a really interesting battle between Universal Studios and Disney, where Universal has some real game. But be that as it may, all on in the total view of ownership really comes down to that being able to have complete say over the character and what happens. Now, a different way of looking at ownership is that you don't have say over what happens, but you get money. And that's the other way that people normally think about ownership, is that, I have some ownership of the character, so therefore I get a royalty check whenever the character is used, or if a graphic novel is published, or if licensing rights are sold, or whatever else, I get some kickback for that character. In the art community and design community, that's often how people think about ownership, because so much of art is work for hire, that you have full out ownership, and then you have financial ownership, which is just really a fancy way of saying royalties, or some kind of sum that gets to come back to you. And then there's like, you're going to get paid what you're paid, and whatever else happens. And that's the scenario of which most of the work is done. So in Marvel and DC's case, when new characters are created, things are done, universe is made, etc. If that character takes off, then the person gets nothing. Now, there were some different contracts made and other things, but generally speaking, there's no credit that happens. There's no royalty that happens. Nothing. There's a lot of really sticky contracts and agreements that cite, if you create a brand new character, then you may get a royalty if it's used in a certain way. But if the character is changed, like with a costume, or the origin is changed in some way, then things shift. This is one area where DC had a better reputation than Marvel for a long period of time, because DC gave slightly more royalty and more rights for the characters to the creative teams. Now, DC also, I think the flip side to that coin is they got some really bad reputations because they screwed around a lot by changing the character kind of just enough that they could basically say, okay, you don't get your royalty anymore. And there's a couple of kind of famous cases of that, and some lawsuits that have happened and other things. But Marvel has tended to be a little bit more black and white, of just, you create it for us, you get nothing. In recent times, it's become, I'd say, a little bit more trendy or cool to credit the creator, even though you don't have to. So you'll notice with a lot of the Marvel movies and other things, when they've been done, they'll credit some of the original writer artist teams, or kind of the more famous people that added to the character. And that's seen as kind of a tip of the hat thank you to the comics and to the creative team. Generally speaking, they don't have to do that. There's no legal reason they have to do that, and it's being done purely as kind of a nice nod, I would say, to the creative community. And nothing any big corporation does is completely altruistic. So it's also a way of them kind of tapping into the creative community and saying, see, there's more to this comic, there's more to this character than you may have thought. It has a history and a pedigree. It's kind of their way of backdoor touching that marketing and kind of that whole sense of what the comic is like. So that's the basic story. Now, I said there was a simple answer and a complicated answer. The simple answer is you either you have ownership or you don't. And if you don't, then maybe you're getting a royalty, maybe you're getting some credit, but generally speaking, probably not. The more complicated answer is that there are mechanisms in our current legal system to kind of go back and say, well, wait a minute, I did substantial work on this character. I did really kind of critical, important things to this character. And even though the contract was a work for hire contract, you, the publisher, took advantage of me, and I worked beyond what was a normal work for hire arrangement, and added more out of my own kind of nice heart, free will, to what this character was. And so therefore the legal waters get kind of muddy, and that's where some lawsuits have taken place through various estates and others to say, hey, maybe this work for hire agreement was, you take advantage of me, or maybe this work for hire agreement is unfair some way, or maybe I signed the work for hire agreement, but then you asked me to do more than what was in the work for hire agreement, so now the work for hire agreement is invalid. And all of those things can happen. It is, though, the case, and this is true with a lot of lawsuits, it's probably a video all of itself. No matter what a lawyer or somebody might tell you, lawsuits are not won on is the person a good person or not. If you're suing somebody who is a nasty, despicable person, there's no clause in the lawsuit or in the law to say, hey, you know, because the person is a nasty person, the good guy is going to win. That's just not how the law works, unfortunately. And bad guys win a lot. In fact, bad guys who are rich, which tends to be, many bad guys are rich. They tend to win because they're rich. Who has the money tends to win in the end. Is unfortunately kind of the reality of the system at times. But these lawsuits that go on over kind of character rights and ownership and all the rest, they are hard to win. And I think there's a lot of shady lawyers and people who will kind of drum up a feeling within the within the community. Will basically will drum up a feeling that, hey, artist who feels taken advantage of, I know the secret sauce. I know the secret key to getting to you winning, to basically beating this thing. I think you have a really good case. You worked really hard on this character. Don't you think you're owed something? Yeah, you're owed something. And today, these legal fees, man, me saying this is going to just generate all kinds of people thinking I'm talking about something else. I'm saying that if you are a artist or creator, be cautious of the lawyer who wants to set up a GoFundMe or something for you in order to go chase down this corporation for kind of your rights of the character, because the odds of you winning are very, very slight. Even if the person says you've got a completely open and shut case. And I think the trap is when they say, well, nothing is 100%, but I think you have a really good case because you're owed. That's almost always kind of code for, let's raise a bunch of money so I can make it, so I can get the money, and you may or may not win, but probably not. I think when you look at IP cases and you look at places where somebody signed a work for hire agreement and then are wanting to get out of it or change it in some way, the success ratio for those agreements is not zero, but close to zero. It's very hard to win in a case where you have a contract or you have an employment agreement and there's some work for hire clause, and you're trying to basically get around that. It's good luck. And even if the company took advantage of you, manipulated things, took maybe caught you in a moment of weakness when you signed that work for hire agreement, or maybe didn't explain to you fully what work for hire meant, that's not really going to matter. You're going to be facing a really steep uphill climb to get around that. So generally speaking, if you're a creator and you're going to work at Marvel today and you create a new character, you create the next Deadpool, the best you can hope for is down the road, you are going to have yourself credited in the movie of the character you created. Royalties and other things, if you didn't get them up front, you're not going to be getting them down the road either. I've heard artists say at one point that, well, if Marvel or DC, really, cared about the artist community, if they really looked inside their heart, they'd realize they're making billions of dollars. They could spare some money for us. That's not how big companies think. They don't think like, well, we made all this money, so we might as well give some of it away. That's not how any of them think. They that's not how it works. Wish it was, but no. So I hope this answered the question about IP ownership, where it goes, kind of how it works, how it sits currently at the big two, and what you can do about it. I mean, fundamentally, this is the reason why a lot of artists and creators and writers went to places like Image, because they wanted both the money opportunities that would come off of movies and other things, and they also wanted the rights to be able to say, this is how the character is going to be portrayed in a movie. And if you don't like it, pound sand. No, this character can't be injected into the Avengers for no apparent reason. This character is mine. I say where they go. That's what they wanted. And so they went to Image where they could have more ownership and control, and they got it. And, the trade-off there, lots of people say, well, why wouldn't everybody do that? Well, because then you're giving up the marketing mechanism and power of the giant Marvel DC promotional engine, where, even if you create a bad character, you're pretty much assured it's going to sell something. I mean, maybe not much of something. These days, less and less of something, but still, it's going to sell something. It's not going to sell 10 copies. It's going to sell thousands of books. You know, and that's why they do it. Work for hire agreements are also secure. If you sign one, you are going to get a paycheck. If you go into business with yourself and your idea isn't a good one, you're not going to get a paycheck. That's the other reason. Security goes a long way. So if you have any other questions on this, leave in the comments below. What do you think? What's the balance here between work for hire, working for yourself, or working for somebody else? What's your take on it? Love to know your thoughts. Leave me a comment below. Like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications. Follow me on Twitter at Perch, and thank you for listening.